Good Friday, everybody. This is a yet another day when you are with Councillor Graham Campbell, the co-convener of SNP Socialists, and my joint co-convener, Janis Wilson, on
Good morning,
another.
good afternoon, happy Friday.
And nothing much happened today either, did it? No, only the.
No, not at all. I think it was quite a quiet night last night.
Oh yeah, quiet night, which lasted to about 6 a.m. for me at the Glasgow count.
Oh, God.
Oh boy, so coming out of there at daylight. But I finished it by congratulating, by hugging Alison Thewlis, mass group hug. And I hope people saw that. But and then shaking Maureen Burke's hand, as we left. So investing the spirit of that. But let's start with the obvious. This is a massive victory for the Labour Party, the biggest ever result they've ever had, and the massive defeat for the Tories, the worst result they've had since 1832, which is when we kind of had democracy, the beginnings of it, the Great Reform Act. Duke of Wellington was the last Tory leader then, and this is their worst result ever.
I mean, I'm happy that the Tories have been completely and utterly obliterated. Not so much in Scotland, but UK-wide, and the worst of them have gone.
Douglas Ross.
But the result in Scotland it's not surprising. It's not surprising. But I'm struggling to understand it, I think. Because Labour are no different from the Tories. They'll just deliver horrible policies in a kinder way. So yeah, no, it was a bit of a blow this morning to get the full extent of what has happened. And certainly here in Lothian East, looking at the numbers, the Tories have absolutely given their vote to Labour. Absolutely given their vote to Labour to keep the SNP out.
So that seems to be that the tactically voting, if it worked anywhere, it's worked against us.
Yes, yeah. But that was Labour's intention, though. Labour didn't want to get rid of the Tories in Scotland. They wanted to get rid of the SNP.
Which they have done, by and large.
Which they've done, which is... Time will tell. Time will tell. He's got 2 years to prove that he is different.
Did you see his Prime Minister speech just a few minutes ago?
No, I haven't even turned the telly on this morning.
Essentially, he said he's ending the performative thing that referring to Boris Johnson, so performative gimmicks, and he wants service and delivery. So he's not going to be flashy or showy. He's just going to get on with the job, kind of thing. So obviously he's lowering expectations, but he's expecting to show that government should win back the trust of the people who are disillusioned just now. So he's realised that he's got to try and deliver something in those first years. And most people will, who are sceptical about politicians right now, will give him maybe a year to settle in, to do something. But if there's nothing noticeably different, then the danger that this election result has clearly delivered, the obvious thing is Farage and the right. The fact that Farage got elected, and that reform is so influential in making sure Tories lost loads of seats, but also clearly took some votes from Labour. One of those things you notice straight away early on in the night, in the northeast, in Sunderland, Newcastle, all them places where they gather their vote really early. Reform came second in all of those seats in the northeast with, like 10,000 votes, that sort of thing. So not small percentages either. And so Reform is second to Labour in lots of the heartland seats, and it won back in the north of the country, and it's second in a lot of places in the south. And you have to also say that, surprisingly, and this is one of the things we picked up from our vote in Glasgow, Reform came third in 3 of the 6 Glasgow seats from nowhere. And they clearly weren't expecting that, because none of their candidates turned up to the count. So even that message about stopping the boats, anti-immigration stuff, that had some traction even here in Scotland, although not as much as down south. But that they got enough votes in Glasgow to suggest that,
Reform here got more votes than the Liberal Democrats and the Greens.
Yes, they beat the Greens in 3 out of the 6.
So that's incredible.
So that's puts them on course for winning seats in Holyrood if they are able to maintain that.
Yep.
So that's a worrying sign. But the big one in England is, of course, if Starmer fails, there's a right-wing Republican. Farage's first comments were, "We're coming for you, Labour, and coming to you from the right." So this is a government that's going to be centre ground, being pressured from its right by Farage, and there's no real pressure from the left because the SNP is not there in Parliament to hold them to account. And the left inside the Labour Party is minuscule because John McDonnell's back, Diane Abbott's back, Jeremy got elected independently, which is fabulous. So
that was, you know, that and Alba losing all their deposits, I think, were the only things that I could take from the election that were positive.
There's more and more. We'll go into some of this, but let's analyse the SNP vote. I mean, the first thing that I want to say is that there's a number of different microcosms in Scotland. I mean, obviously, people listen to this will be aware of that. But Glasgow and the west of Scotland, and then the Central Belt and Edinburgh, the Lothians, and then the Borders, and then the northeast of the country and the Highlands are all different regional microcosms with different balances of forces. And what I think it shows you that Edinburgh and the Lothians is probably more similar to English constituencies now in terms of social demographics, how people vote, the strong Lib Dem presence, the strong Unionist presence, alongside, the Greens have clearly established themselves as the holders of the environmentally interested and far left vote. They've captured that now. It's going to them. And that was a voter constituency that was really important for the SNP to win seats before. They clearly now are voting Green. That's established now, and that's also established in England because Green won 4 seats, which is brilliant. I'm very pleased about Bristol, and obviously about them maintaining positions in Brighton and winning 2 other seats. Interestingly, I went to school in East Anglia, so I went to school in Suffolk. So weirdly, towns like Stowmarket, where is it? The other one was Bury St Edmunds, now has Labour MP. It's weird. Liz Truss lost her seat to Labour, which is incredible in Norfolk. God's sake, what's going on there? So there's some indications that clearly Labour's won through in votes in places like that. So if Labour are winning there, then they've captured a lot of ground from the Tories. But it's clearly reform caused the Tories to lose a hell of a lot of seats. Yeah. But coming back to the SNP vote, Edinburgh and the Lothian, I think your area is a very distinct sort of suburban central belt, which I think is demographically behaves a bit differently to where Glasgow and the West probably does. We're more SNP Labour fight. And, relatively speaking, we got 30% nationally across the board. So that tells you the SNP vote actually held up. The core vote held up pretty well in the worst possible circumstances. Actually, that's quite surprising. Our vote didn't collapse. It reduced a bit. Some of our floaters from 2015 onwards still care about independence probably, but they decided to give Labour a try and give it a go. But we didn't lose that much to them. In fact, in Glasgow North East, we've got 33%, which is actually 3% above our national average. Yeah. Tommy Shepherd did really well in Edinburgh East, actually. He also performed above the national average, and he got about 33% as well.
Gutted for Tommy. Gutted.
Yeah, but his part is the most yes bit of Edinburgh and the Lothian. So you can see that vote, partly because of probably the strong personality and presence of Tommy, partly, but also that there is a strong still residual SNP vote. So we still got a vote which is clear, votes for us for left of centre and nationalistic reasons, but it's still there. And it means we have a possibility, if we have the right strategy and reaction to this, to win some of that support back.
Yeah.
If you look at the North East, I want to look at the North East. The North East, clearly, we won seats there. We won in Aberdeen, Dundee, Angus, Perth. We kept our core heartland there. And I think probably you have to say that Stephen and Co.'s strategy to talk about North East jobs, defend the oil and gas sector, talk about just transition, and even sitting on the fence environmentally, you have to say it's probably worked for them. Yeah. It's also a position I would have agreed with personally, because I think we should have been more stridently for just transition and say no, not new oil and gas. Didn't necessarily harm Labour, but Labour didn't win that many seats up in the North East. So they will probably say that vindicates their local approach being different. But it's pretty clear you can't really have national SNP messaging because it doesn't work. We couldn't say vote SNP to beat the Tories. That message simply didn't work anywhere except against Douglas Ross. People weren't going to vote tactically for us. They tended, as you were saying before, that people voted tactically against the SNP to make sure the SNP won. What do you want to say about that?
Sorry?
People voting tactically against the SNP.
Oh, yeah. I mean, certainly here in Lothian East, certainly 100%. And when you're up against that level of tactical voting, there's not a great deal you can do. East Lothian East, as it is now, is very unionist, very unionist. We've got one of the lowest percentages in 2014. It's a very unionist constituency, and we did win it. And I think we won in 2015, 2017, 2019, but I think Kenny and McCaskill defecting to Alba did us no favours. I think that we've got to look at that as being part of the reason why our vote share here plummeted, but turnout here was depressingly low as well. So there's all these different factors for here in particular that worked against us.
Yeah, I think the turnout was obviously iffy. I don't know how the weather was, but it was absolutely blowing a gale all day in Glasgow. So our turnout was a bit depressed as well. It was 47% in Glasgow North East, which isn't bad, but, under the circumstances. But I think it definitely really motivated voters when they come out to vote. And I'm not sure.
%?
Yes.
Turnout?
Yeah.
For a general election?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. I know yesterday's turnout was the second lowest since 1885, I think. The one in 2001 was lower, but the one yesterday was depressingly low. And also there was the whole issue with the school holidays in Scotland and people not receiving their postal ballots and
the voter ID thing.
There was
loads of people got sent away. Yeah. Voter suppression methods worked for the Tories. Yeah. So there's no doubt that there's that. I hope Labour repeals that ID thing so that people can actually vote again, because that's not helping democracy. The massive majority probably is that puts the kibosh to the idea of PR ever coming in. Labour are not going to give up. That kind of majority. We'll electoral reform so that we lose a majority. No, they're not.
I mean, I'm not making excuses for yesterday. I'm not. We did terribly, and it was a lot of it was our own making. I'm not trying to say, it wasn't our fault, and I think we had a lot of things working against us, but the result was terrible. But things do need to be addressed. I think.
Yes, but do you not think though that we shouldn't overstate the terribleness of it? I mean, given the circumstances when it was called, which was completely inconvenient for everyone in Scotland, but it's actually come at a time when we only just got a new leader. He did steady the ship. You have to say that he actually successfully steadied the ship.
He did,
and in fact,
absolutely
gave us back a bit of credibility and allowed our supporters to stand by us. So I think an element of it, we've done we could have done a lot worse than this, easily so. Had we had, had we chosen the wrong leader for a start, and I'll go into that. But I think that some of the trends that looking into the voters and so on, I'll look into this. So first of all, how Scottish Labour ran. They ran as an opposition to the SNP government in Scottish record government. So they ran in opposition to the Scottish Government's record in office, and also to a large extent to the Council's record here in Glasgow in office. The messages, the specific ones: 14 years of the Tory failure, 17 years of SNP failure, vote for change, and vote Labour to beat the Tories. These three lines all had some traction, and that certainly, I think that's why they won all the seats in the West and the Central Belt. The Greens also ran as an opposition party. The breaking up of the Bute House Agreement allowed them to run as an opposition and run on. Nobody other than them was making the arguments on climate change. They were the only ones doing it, and frankly, climate didn't play a big role in the election. Ironically, independents didn't either, and for good, understandable reasons. Because even we were running on the ABCs. And, the fact is that the two most important issues were austerity and the cost of living crisis.
Yeah.
Brexit, less so, but those were the two main issues. And it was right that we ran on those two issues. I think if we'd not run on those two issues, the public would have seen us as ignoring their concerns.
Yep.
If we'd have run blindly on independence, as Albert did, we'll show what the result for that was. Less than 1% across the country. So, massive deposits and so on. So clearly that strategy would not have worked. So the idea that, we should have been more independent. No. If we'd have put independence as our only issue, we would have lost even more ground. So we were right to run on the austerity and cost of living stuff. That did give us some traction. We got messages across successfully about what we've done to help people out of poverty. That worked for us.
Yes, yeah. And I think Labour, like we said, I can't remember if it was recorded, but like we said, they actually won on a lower vote share than Corbyn got in 2019, and that the Tories won over in 2019. So the system is broken. The first past the post system is completely and utterly useless. But people here, I think, voted Labour to get rid of the Tories, and I understand. I'm not, I'm glad the Tories have gone. I can't state that enough.
Yay!
And a lot of people probably use this election to get rid of them.
Yes. To make sure of it. And that we were probably underestimated the degree to that message would work. We didn't know. I mean, I have to say, from being able to speak to our own supporters, I knew our own supporters were relatively solid. I knew that. What we didn't know was don't knows. One of the things I found out from my Labour friends was how they campaigned in my seat. And, Anne did a great job pushing forward what she had done over the last 5 years. And that was really well picked up out there in the community. But the Labour people targeted don't knows people who had once voted SNP maybe 5-10 years ago. But what they had asked them a specific question that we don't ask people, which is to rank from 0 to 10, give a mark out of 10 for how you feel about other parties. So if you don't vote for us, what's your mark out of 10? If you vote SNP, what do you think of Labour? And what they did was that anybody who marked more than 5, between 5 and 10, was persuadable. If they weren't marked less than that, then they weren't persuadable. So they concentrated on going to the persuadables as don't knows. And do you know what? They managed to turn some of those don't knows. And that was how they won. That was what they did that was different to what we did. We went to identifiable supporters. And that you wouldn't have won this election. But I think it's obvious that we probably wouldn't have won this regardless. There's nothing that any candidate could have done. There was a groundswell which was for change, which was moving that you couldn't do anything about. We also ran as an incumbent government with a record. And one of the key groups of people that clearly voted against the SNP were public sector workers, and particularly education workers, because they've been experiencing austerity at the hands of our government over these last few years, and we've now got the blame electorally for that austerity. Our message of blame the Tories for austerity for how they fund us, which is true, didn't cut ice this time amongst that section of voters.
Yeah, I think out of all the public sector workers, the education sector is the one that is the hardest to please. Even though teachers in Scotland get paid a lot more than they do in England, what was the thing that I think really annoyed me as well is that people were falling for devolved issues for this election when education. The Westminster election is not going to sort it out in Scotland. We can have 57 Labour MPs in Scotland, and we've still got an SNP Scottish government. So it's not going to change anything to do with education or how public sector workers are funded. And I think Labour disingenuously kind of made it about devolved issues.
Yes, but you can't blame it. If we were in the same situation, we would do the same.
Yeah.
So I don't blame them for that. We have to run a record, and therefore how working class people, voters generally perceive our party and our government, what it's about. We know that the party is a social democratic left of centre party that supports workers' rights and supports tackling poverty and inequality. But the record in government because we've had to implement austerity. The reality is that is an SNP government's fault. The fact that this college lecturers, some of them I know, have been in industrial action for 3 years.
Yeah.
We now need to have our minister step in and sort that out, because it's just not right that they're having to go out and strike. They're college managers who are paid ridiculous salaries. That Paul Little's paid, getting offered £200,000, more than the First Minister, more than the Prime Minister, to run a college.
Yeah.
Guy, we need to get into that college sector, reform it massive, probably disband these colleges and go back to community colleges and these big, massive conglomerates. We need to remove and stop giving public money to them and sort the workers' rights out and get the college lecturers their due. Because unless education workers and other public sector workers see that we're on their side, forget trying to get their votes again in future.
Yeah.
We were saying the right things about austerity, but we have to have the right actions about austerity.
I think the fact that Starmer is not going to end austerity, I think that's going to hit people. People will realise that pretty quickly. And it's not enough to say that, he's just not going to end the two-child cap. But it's not just that part of it. He's going to continue with austerity in general. And I think after a year, when people realise they're not better off under Labour, hopefully they'll start to see that they've just swapped one red for blue, but there's no change.
Yes, but how long a honeymoon do you think they'll get? Sorry, but how long a honeymoon do you think you'll get? I mean, some of the broadcasters were saying maybe Starmer has a year to persuade people that he can change something meaningfully before he gets pressure from Farage on his rate,
Exactly. I mean, we saw this in '97 when Tony Blair won his massive landslide, and then he went straight into war, which finished off his party, Gordon Brown, in the crash and selling off the gold, blah blah blah. It's almost as if the Tories are in charge, but then occasionally Labour will come in and they can't fix what the Tories have caused, and then the Tories get back in again, and it's just the cycle of the two-party state, and it's it's depressing. And change should mean change, not just a change of colour.
Yeah, I get you. Do you think? I'm going to ask you a question because I wrote this down. I thought, was the SNP mistaken by leading with the message, Labour are winning England, Scotland's votes are irrelevant unless you vote for us? Were we wrong to concede with that message?
Yes.
In hindsight, were we wrong to not say, well, no, Labour isn't winning? We were trying to be truthful, saying, yes, Labour's going to win by landslide.
Yeah.
But obviously, if you tell the electors you're going to lose the election, or rather your opponents are going to win the election, it's harder for you to then argue, well, vote for us.
I think that's a bit of a negative campaign, isn't it? Oh, they're going to win anyway. They don't need Scotland, blah, blah, blah. And they don't need Scotland. It's a fact. Mathematically, they don't need Scotland. But I think...
And given where they've won in England, it's incredible. They've wiped the Tories out in Wales, and Clyde done well, so shout out for them.
Yeah.
But the reality is that they've wiped people out. I mean, I went to school in Suffolk, so the idea that places like Stowmarket and in Norfolk and was it Bury St Edmunds has got a Labour MP now. That is astonishing. I mean, I don't think they've got that many Labour councillors in these places. Never mind, they've got Labour MPs. So if places like that are voting Labour, then obviously they definitely didn't need the Scottish votes.
No, and it was always going to be a landslide. It was always going to be a Labour landslide. I think there's so many things to take from this. Obviously, the message that we put out didn't work. I mean, it worked enough to hold up our vote, but we needed to up that to beat Labour.
Yeah. I think we maintained our core support, but we weren't gaining any support for it. And we also lost, I think, some micro-electorates, some key micro-electorates. One of them I've talked about already, which is public sector workers affected by austerity. But the other one that we lost, I think there was a degree of the LGBT community. Because, and this is where the issue of what does the SNP left now do? Because, of course, different people in the party will say, well, look at who we've got elected. We've got 2 out of the 9 elected so far from the SNP are identifiably left. One of them's one of our members, right, from the SNP Socialists. But so maybe the left MPs will have more of an influence in what the SNP group does, but the SNP group will have much less influence in Parliament down in Westminster. But the way that kind of, I suppose, well, given that the LGBT voters will have seen Kate Forbes being our deputy, it was wise to bring her into the tent of government to keep our group coalition together. But we clearly lost votes to the Greens, probably, from that kind of aggressive pro-LGBT voter. I think there's clear evidence that we lost ground because of that. Now, some of those from the other side of our party would probably say there's nothing we could have done about that. And I wouldn't blame us losing the election on this. No, but I think it's a factor, not the major one. But, the main one was the drive for change. And, the climate, people who are interested in the climate really, they didn't have anywhere else to go except the Greens in this election because it wasn't talked about. And the other big,
I'm glad the Greens increased their vote. Good on them, and I think they have won a lot of our more left of centre voters. And I can't be angry about that because they're a great party.
Well, some pro-Indy people will say, well, Greens is a pro-independence party. Why did it stand an election, first past election? It knows it can't win, where its standing will impact the possibility of SNP people being elected. There's no doubt that there's 2 seats in Glasgow at least where the Green vote was bigger than the Labour majority, right? But you can't be sure that all of those Green voters would have voted for SNP or voted pro-Indy, because not all Green voters are pro-Indy. Don't know that. So you could. So I don't blame them for running. If you're running and you believe in it, people voted Green because they wanted to believe in what the Greens stood for, and that's legitimate. So we have to accept that that's what it is. What it means for us, though, is that we are likely to ever go back to SNP winning this large, broad, 48%. We're not getting that. The question is can we build what kind of coalition are we going to be? Are we going to be a centre-left coalition for the future? Will the lesson learned from this by the SNP be we need to remain where we are ideologically and politically, or do we go more to the centre or more to the right? That's going to be an issue in the immediate future. I hope that we don't take the wrong conclusions on this, but many of those loyal to John would argue that bringing KF into the tent was the right thing to do, step horses, blah, blah, blah. But it lost us progressive votes. And,
sorry, my cat just got in a mouse. Sorry. Jesse's dealing with it.
So just to sum up then,
do you know what?
I say, will we be able to keep our left and centre pro-Indy majority coalition together in order to get the events? We clearly haven't got an electoral way to get it now, and I think people know that. Where does that leave us? When we lost in 2014, we didn't anticipate that the next part of the journey would be millions of people joining the SNP and then voting us into Parliament. So we can't anticipate what will happen now. Weird things could happen. But
I think as well, sorry, I think that, we had 56 MPs down in Westminster in 2015, and we couldn't change anything because of the mathematics. And, we've had this amazing majority down there, but nothing's changed because it can't change because of the numbers. And I think people perhaps thought, well, we can send all these amazing people down and they'll stand up and they'll talk about Scotland and they'll stand up for Scotland, but they get crushed by 600 other MPs who are not from Scotland, and I think maybe that could have played a part as well in it. This particular election, the need to get into the Tories was more than sending down, people who would stand up for Scotland. Perhaps, I don't know.
Well, the ones, yes, I think that's true. But obviously, the ones who have been sent down over Scotland, we've got now a tribe of Labour Scottish MPs. Will they speak up for Scotland? How will they do it? Will they stand up to Starmer and say to them, look, Scotland needs more money spent on its public services. We need the councils that we run to have more money. The ones that we don't run, those we want them to have more money. We want the NHS waiting lists to be sorted out. We need more money. Will they get it? I think not. But more point, will they stand up to their own government to try to get it?
Yeah, that's going to be the interesting thing, I think, over the next coming months, year, 2 years, up until the Holyrood elections.
What are we putting for Gaza, by the way? We haven't talked about Gaza, but we've had a couple of Palestine independents elected across the country, although Galloway lost. A couple of the independents won, which is great, in Birmingham and somewhere else. Where was the other one? Jonathan Ashford. Oh, couldn't have happened to a not nicer person. So he lost in Leicester. So great. He thought he was going to be a cabinet minister, but he was so horrible in the Corbyn era, being disloyal to Corbyn, and what an Alan Bastard he was. So I'm very glad he lost, as well as Liz Truss having given us the Port Salet moment. But Corbyn winning, him losing, the Gaza independents, a couple of them did win. So will they recognise Palestine as a state? Well, they say they will, but will they?
No, they won't. And they'll continue selling arms to Israel. And the tragedy is that not one party, not one of the two main parties even mentioned Palestine in the election campaign, or they did, to expel pro-Palestine members from the party. And the tragedy is that we don't even know the death count anymore in Gaza, because no one's reporting, no one's counting. It just seems to have gone away in everyone's memories. And, Starmer, the Zionist, has now got full reign to do or not do anything about it. That's actually quite scary.
Yeah, I fear for Palestine, because I think that the death will continue.
Yes, it will. It will. And I think what is the end result now, despite Corbyn being elected, and I'm so happy for him, so happy. It was brilliant. But there's now fewer voices in that chamber advocating for the people of Palestine. I can't remember who's the MP that won in Cowdenbeath. MAP's chairperson.
I don't know. Was that Luke Akehurst or something like that?
No. I can't remember. She was the.
Oh yes, that one. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
What's her name?
And she says, I'll continue to stand up for Palestine, but she's just won for the Labour Party, who are not standing up for anyone. So, yeah.
Well, it'd be interesting to see if she ever pipes up for Palestine in that parliament. But we obviously have to give them a chance, because they're there
absolutely.
Now. They're the only voices we will have, apart from 9 SNP MPs. But all of the things they will have said on doorsteps to get people to stick with them on Palestine. I'm allowed to say it, but they will betray. Of course, they'll betray us, and they'll do it quickly. So people will feel they were cheated.
She was the CEO for MAP, and she won for Labour in Cowdenbeath, but I can't recall her name. Yeah.
No. Names, we need it. But I think we've got through. Is there any last thoughts you have going away from this? What do you think we can do as an independence movement, as a party, and what we now do? Because I think my take on it is clearly the Alba strategy was completely and totally defeated. The idea that you just do it on independence as a civil issue, not in a Westminster election, you just can't do it. The coalition with the Greens breaking up probably cost us some votes, and that's a key relationship that needs to be repaired about what structure we work in to try and promote the cause of independence, how we do it as a citizens movement, what pressure we can potentially put on Labour to, I've talked to Labour colleagues who said that, we do want more devolution for Scotland. We want Scotland to be able to spend more public money, and to do that, we have to have more devolved power. There is something in their manifesto about it, but they haven't done very much about it. Let's see what they agree to do, because Wales needs some more, Scotland needs some more, without more powers, they can't be serious about tackling anything to do with poverty or inequality.
Talking about devolved nations, Ian Paisley Jr. lost his seat.
Yay!
Every cloud. Sinn Féin gained.
Yay!
I think the bottom line is that this election was never about independence. Even if we returned 57 SNP MPs, Starmer would still say no. People didn't put it as their main concern, like we've already stated. I think in 2 years' time, we've got 2 years to regroup, rethink our strategy. The Green vote has gone up, which is boding well for 2 years' time. But yeah, we need to have a more solid stance on independence, and not just we'll ask for another Section 30. I think that, that was never going to work for this election, which I think is why people didn't vote for SNP as well, because, it would make no difference. I think in 2 years' time...
But also they knew we couldn't deliver it. I mean, they could have voted for us, and they knew we couldn't deliver it. That's the other thing. A vote can't deliver the thing that they say it's going to deliver. Yeah. It's not credible. So that gives us 2 years to think about how do we go into Holyrood, and obviously we want a pro-independence majority, all of that, but it's clear that it's not going to happen with just SNP votes. It's going to be SNP and Green votes, and then it's going to have to be, what kind of government will happen after that, and how we will govern. These are questions which we've got time to sort out, but we mustn't make hasty or harsh conclusions now. We need to properly think it out and not go to the
the SNP coalition was working. It was working well. And I think, ending it has damaged us. But 2 years to regroup, 2 years to think about strategy.
So we're going to take a break from these podcasts now for a while, actually, because the rest. But we will. I suppose we will come back in maybe in a month's time to work out how we felt about the aftermath, and what a month of Starmer in office is like, and how the SNP has reacted, and how the governments have decided to get on. I mean, John has said that he will try hardest to work with the Labour government. Let's see if that mutual respect, public service ethos that Starmer talked about, whether that translates into a better relationship between governments. Let's hope it does, because for the sake of ordinary citizens, it needs to. Yeah. Well, signing off. Hopefully, nothing will happen next week.
No, nothing at all.
Nothing much happened. Nothing much happened at all. Good to speak to you, and thank you to Ungagged for giving us this platform to do this. It's been a real pleasure. So thank you to Neil, and to to you, Janis. All the best.
Thank you very much, Graham. Thank you.